Our story begins on the 50th year of the last king's reign. After decades of balancing the competing houses and guilds on the brink of a civil war, he had united them all behind him with a common cause: space. It was time for our kin to spread to the far ends of the galaxy. But in due time, the squabbling between the various factions resurfaced in a scale we had never seen before. Once we found life out there, everything changed.
Hello, my name is Zhatelier. Welcome back welcome to a brand new series of Aurora 4X. So, yesterday we ended the Red Galaxy series, and today we'll start a new one, and this, as you probably saw from the title, is episode 0, so there's not going to be actual gameplay in here, but I will be going through the setting a little bit here. There's also some links down below in the description, as well as the list of players who will be taking part in this. So the basic idea is that we have a kingdom, and then there's various factions. There's some houses, or like major houses, and some lesser houses will eventually become bigger players, so to speak. And then there's some guilds that hold certain privileges to do various things, and then there's the faithful, which is kind of like a church kind of thing, except much more nature-focused, I suppose. There's also going to be the various heraldry and list of players at the end of the episode as well, with some graphics in there. But we have as the 500 million population to start with, we already have some techs. I'll go through those in a few moments. But we basically, what I did is I had just the default start population, although we are not on default, well, we're not on Sol, let's just put it that way. I'll go through the system a little bit as well, but I basically converted the conventional factories already into various things, and I added the maintenance facilities quite a bit higher. So we have a decent facility capacity for the time being, but that's not necessarily going to last for too long. And I've already set up some of the construction stuff, so we'll be building factories and mines, some research facilities, another shipyard, and some infrastructure, although the infrastructure might not be terribly important, or at least not as important as in the Red Galaxy playthrough, because we will actually have the civilian shipping this time. So that should help a fair bit. We got decent resources, although there's several resources that are rather low, like Vendorite, Boronite, and Galasite, and Corundium also is a bit low, and Corbamite. Duranium, on the other hand, we got plenty. Almost 300,000, and accessibility 1, so that's going to be quite a bit of resources for a while. And then shipyards, we got one 5 kiloton shipyard for corvettes, although those corvettes are not particularly good yet. We have a fairly little tech, so they are relatively poor in quality, quite frankly. Then we got some survey ships. We will actually increase the size of this to 5,000 ton capacity. Probably on the next episode we'll start doing that. Then we got one commercial shipyard with 2 slipways, and it can build both colony ships and freighters from that same shipyard, because they basically share most of the components the same, and it's the same size and all that, so it helps a lot when you don't need an extra one. But the next shipyard that we are making is going to be for tugs, because we are going to need some tugs anyway, so have that going. Then in terms of research, we're currently focusing on, well, actually, first of all, let's go through the completed researches. So we got the Transnewtonian tech, then we got the first 3 upgrades for armor, so we got Duranium armor now. Because we basically started on, it's a hybrid start basically. We started on the conventional start, and then I has game as text for about 25,000 points. So we got the particle beams, or the first particle beam, and I actually researched that as well. Components I did automatic, or for free basically. And then we got some ground units that we'll go through in a little bit. Logistics, we got the cryogenic transport and large fuel storage, but that's about it. And then power propulsion, we got a few engine types, we got the Actually, It shouldn't show these jump drives in there, because we haven't got, but those are prototypes that we can research at some point. Well, those are actually future prototypes. I'm a bit surprised that it shows them in the completed list though. Anyway, we got the jump point theory, we got the first reactor and engine techs, we got a 0.9 fuel usage and the engine power modifier and engine size modifier, the first one. And again, the engines, size 4 reactor on power 4 reactor, and then the commercial engine. But yeah, that's about it. Then in sensors, we got the survey sensors, active sensor strength 10, and then we got some of the various components. That's about it in terms of that. We got some ground units already in the production queue. We'll go through that a little bit, but that is more or less it on here. So let's actually go through the various guilds and factions. I think going through here is the easiest one. So we got, first of all, you'll probably notice throughout this series that each faction has their own letter as identification. So the royal faction has A and so forth, and then the houses are on like the start of the alphabet, and then the guilds and the faithful are at the end of the alphabet, so there's room to add in more if need be. But yeah, we got royal faction, then we got Hand of the King, which is basically like chapter of knights, more or less. And then we got House Alexandrus, which is one of the noble houses. And then we got House Romanov, which is also a noble house. Then we got Commerce Guild, which is the only faction allowed to transport resources and installation between the factions, other than the royal faction, of course. Royal faction will be helping the various factions to set up their planets and so forth. And first we'll do the colonies as the royal faction to get started, and then once they at least have like a few million people or something like that, then they'll be granted to a faction to use. And of course then the player that is leading that faction gets to decide what sort of things they'll be producing there, and they'll decide their own ship designs if they want to, and the crown unit designs and all that sort of stuff. So they do have a fair bit of input, I'd say. Then we got the Miners Guild, which is the only one that is allowed to do orbital mining. And then Gas Harvesters Guild, which is pretty obvious again. Then the only one that is allowed to do thorium harvesting at gas giants. Then they'll be selling the oil to various factions. Then Crafters Guild is the only one that is allowed to pre-make ship components, build orbital habitats, and space stations, as in the installation. Of course, you don't necessarily need the space stations, but if you want to be building your own, space stations, or the, ships, space station ships, then you need to have that. So, there's a little bit of demand for that, but I am currently leading the Crafters Guild and the Scholars Guild myself, because there's not going to be a lot of actions for those. Scholar Guild is the only one that is allowed to exploit the ruins and anomalies, for example. But other than that, they don't have a lot to do. So both of these are governed by myself. And there's the Faithful that are the only ones that can do, or can have, terraforming modules. So they are kind of the privilege to do that, and other factions might hire them to then terraform their planets that they want to inhabit, and to be a bit more effective. And of course then the factions will be trading a fair bit between, or hopefully will be trading a fair bit between each other, and trading like ships or resources and so forth, or installations. But anyway, so I'm leading this royal faction. Then Hand of the King is led by Zhatelier. House Alexandrus is led by Albertus, which is a member of my community. House Romanov is led by Saithorthepyro, also a member of my community. Commerce Guild is led by Mordred Viking, who is a friend of the channel and has been taking some sort of part, especially in the Age of Sail series and a few other series that I've done with him in the past. Miners Guild is led by Sir Squire, so apparently we got 2 Sirs in this playthrough right now. That's interesting, but he's another streamer. Gas Harvesters Guild is led by Catmandos, also another member of the community. Then Crafters and Scholars are led by myself, and Faithful are led by Different Strategy, Hopefully I didn't butcher that in. Anyway, Defron is leading that, but he's done a lot of tutorials for Aurora Forex C-Sharp, so those are definitely worth a check. But yeah, we got, in terms of ships, what we start with, we got 5 survey vessels, 5 corvettes, divided between the Houses, the Royal Faction, and the Faithful. And the Houses and the Faithful are the only ones that are allowed to build military ships aside from the Royal Faction, of course. The guilds are not allowed to build them. They are allowed to own them if they buy them from other factions, or mostly the Houses and the Faithful, or are given by the Royal Faction. And there's some other limitations. There's a bit more of that in the document that is linked down below in the description. But anyway, after the corvettes and survey vessels, we also got 4 cargo ships and 1 colony ship. And cargo ships have just 1 standard cargo hold and some engines and so forth, and the colony ship has a capacity for 100,000 colonists. So that's a decent amount of colony capacity that we can at least get started, especially with the colonies within this system. But that's all the ships that we start with, and then divide it into various fleets, and most of the, or actually all of the corvettes are currently undergoing training. Just pointing that out. But if we have a look at the system that we have, it is about 30 billion or 28 to 30 billion in diameter. There's a decent asteroid belt there. It has 7 planets, 5 of which are gas giants. And we are on a terrestrial planet, and then there's 1 planet down there which has Venusian atmosphere. So it's probably a bit like Venus. Hopefully it has a lot of resources, because this system doesn't have a lot of things to go for it. Not even all that many colonizable planets, so we'll be trying to probably escape from here as soon as possible. And of course our capital planet's name is Virales. That's just a random name that I pulled out of my hat. Or, well, anyway. We have already set up all the officers to take on the various commands and so forth, so we actually have not quite a shortage of officers yet, but not far off either. In terms of crown units, we got a fair bit of a fair selection of infantry, at least for the Royal Faction. Of course, the factions themselves can then design their own units. And then we got some static units and light vehicles and a couple medium vehicles. The medium vehicles are just either anti-vehicle or anti-personnel duty, and the light vehicles have a bit more selection. Mostly there's 1 headquarter unit for battalions that are more vehicle-based. Then they got the anti-vehicle, anti-personnel, and hold on. Alright, that's the anti-personnel. Then there's the autocannon over there, and then of course the supply truck, which is going to be probably the only supply unit that we'll be using. And we have divided into 1,000-ton battalions, and then 4 of those form into a regiment that is a total size of 5 kilotons, and then into 25 kiloton brigades, and then I think 100 kiloton divisions. And we haven't actually made any plans beyond that right now. Eventually, if need be, we can add in more layers there, but I think 100 kilotons of a unit is probably going to be fairly good to start with anyway. And we got the brigade headquarters over here. It has some various units, a lot of emplacements and some squads there. And then we got the chargers, which are basically the light vehicles. Defense in strong point, which is just emplacements for the front line, more or less. The fire hurlers are basically just light bombardment and some other units to defend there, but then it's going to be in like support position. And then I believe, did we? Yeah, we have a support strong point which has medium bombardment as well as anti-air and various other things there. Now, of course, we don't have construction vehicles available to us yet, so we don't really have that good fortification bonuses, unfortunately, but that is something that will hopefully change. But that's a decent collection of starting units, basic build blocks that we can use. And of course, if the factions don't want to design their own units, then they can always just use the Royal Factions units. The Royal Faction is basically going to be the base of the line units and ships, not necessarily particularly specialized for duties. And of course, the Royal Faction will be in charge of setting up the infrastructure to have ships move through jump points and so forth. So what's probably going to happen is we'll have some jump tenders early on, and then once there's a colony, then we'll build jump gate connections from the capital to the colony. So that at least then the civilian shipping can start taking over, delivering infrastructure and colonies and so forth. There is, of course, a decent bit of backstory that will be probably unfolding throughout the series, as well as some of it has been written out in the document in the description. But I think that's more or less it for showing the basic situation of this start. So tomorrow we'll actually start with gameplay, and at the end here there's going to be small introductions on the different factions on a little bit more detail than I went through here so far. But anyway, that's going to be all for me today, so if you enjoyed this, please like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Also check out the links down below in the description, but other than that, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.